Hello and welcome my partners in crime, and thank you for joining me again for another case. As you can see, I'm still in the same clothes because I've got about 9 to put out, so I'm going to have to try and do as many as I can today and tomorrow. So thank you anyway for joining me. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all you new people that have subscribed. So as I'm saying that, I think if you'd like to subscribe, please hit the subscribe button. You can hit the thumbs up button, which helps with the algorithm, as I've been told. You can hit the bell as well, which gives you notifications to let you know when the next videos are coming out and all this sort of stuff. And there's plenty coming out over the next couple of weeks, I can tell you that. But today I've been dealing with lots of different cases, so it's really important that if you haven't, especially I think for this case, if you haven't watched Christopher Halliwell case, you should watch it, because this is like a follow-on for him. Now, this Christopher Halliwell nightmare, right, is a serial killer. He was done for double murder, and he targeted young women and brutally murdered them, which he did, right? We all know that. He's in prison for a very long time, life sentence and stuff for the murders. Took a long time to convict this man of these murders. So I think he killed Sean, and then he killed Becky. Now, Sean O'Callaghan and Becky Godden he killed. And he killed, I think, Becky first in 2003. That's the one we know about. And then in March 2011 was his last kill. And that was Sean. So this next case is unsolved, right? So there is, this is why I put, it's like 4 in 1, really. And again, I mean no disrespect to any of the victims' families or anything for doing all 4 of these together. But there's a reason why I am, to show you, really, what Christopher Halliwell is really about. Now, this is 4 of many of what this man could have done. So it's a possibility that he could have done these murders. Actually, it's quite a big possibility. Now, when I did Christopher Halliwell's case, it wasn't the case of Sean and Becky. It was about Christopher Halliwell because of he's such a serious killer. And if he wasn't have caught, really, he would have continued to kill. So I think as you go through this, I'll leave it up to you to make up your mind whether you think he is potentially the real prime suspect, really, in these murders or not. I think with Becky Godden, she was a prostitute, and she was a drug addict, and she had used prostitution to keep her drug addict going. Now, Halliwell was a taxi driver, and he knew Becky quite well, actually. He's sort of infatuated with her. And he, I think how he got caught for her murder really was, one, because they found the shovel in one of his properties that had the soil substance on it, which now we can determine where soil comes from and everything else. But also because he drove a van, and that van had broke down in petrol very close to where Becky's body was found many, many years later. And that's really, that helped solidify his his conviction against her. Plus, because he seemed to have a relationship, or he wanted a relationship with Becky, she certainly didn't want one with him. I think that's why he murdered her, really. And as we go into this next case, of these next 4, it's very similar to also one of the other girls within that case. So this is the 4 in 1 case. This is the murders of 4 women, all linked in some way to Halliwell. So, as I've said, these are 4 unsolved murders. So there is a witness. This is why, one of the reasons why Halliwell is sort of really in the focus for certain ones of these killings. So Christopher Halliwell drove a white van. This is what a witness was told about the killer. And one of these white vans, or similar to this white van, or very similar, was spotted at one of these unsolved murder sites. And I think it was revealed as well, linked into another one, that Julie Finley's naked body was dumped after she'd been snatched from the city centre. Now, Julie, again, was a prostitute. And the first one of these cases is going to be the case of Julie Finley. Now, Julie just turned 23 when she was last seen in Liverpool at about 11 p.m. on the 5th of August 1994. The next day, her naked body was found 15 miles away in a field near Rainford Bypass. The new witness said that Halliwell was working in North Wales at the time fitting windows and was living in Aughton, returning home to Swindon, Wiltshire at the weekends. Now, I've just drove up and down from Wales, as many of you know. I do it quite a lot, and you pass Wiltshire and Swindon, and every time I pass it, this man comes to my mind. You know, and I said to my sister the other day, this is where this man come from. There's not a lot of distance between Wales and Swindon in Wiltshire. Not a lot at all, not if you drive. So anyway, a witness said that Halliwell was this former cab driver, wasn't he? And he drove a white D-reg Ford Transit van like the one spotted near Rainford, where this body was dumped. A woman calling herself Tina told police that Julie said that she was going to see a taxi driver. Now, someone fitting Julie's description was last seen at 12:30 a.m. on the 6th of August, yards from where her body was found. She was arguing with a man, very similar to Becky, actually, arguing with a man, and she was being forced into a white transit van. So Julie Finley was, not going to survive this attack, and she didn't. So, okay, let's go over the timeline now of Julie. So she was last seen about 11 p.m. on Friday the 5th of August 1994 in Pembroke Place, and that's near the Liverpool Royal University Teaching Hospital, talking to a man next to some railings. She was wearing, a white t-shirt, they said, that she was wearing. Now, she was found by a 28-year-old computer engineer who had been cycling by on Saturday, the 6th of August 1994, about 1:30 p.m. Now, these were based, I think, in Neverton. I think this was their starting point of this sort of bike ride that was going to happen. Now, he says that he found the body, and when he went to the field to spend a penny to have a wee, he said that she was lying face down, naked, and her head was hidden under some brush, bushes and sort of things like that. He also said that he rang back and got a friend to confirm what he had seen. It's quite shocking, when you find a dead body. For some people, they do very strange things. But anyway, then he called the police and he made sure that no one went near that body. He'd done the right thing. Now, he told the police that he would wait for them to arrive. But what he did was, and he doesn't understand why he did it, he said he just got on his bike and carried on cycling. He thinks he was in a bit of a state of shock, and that's what the police think, and you would be, really. So the police said that they were also interested in tracing this white van that had been seen that night parked near to where her body was discovered. So this is what brings Halliwell into it. One, he was close to this area. Two, he drove this white van, and there's descriptions really as well. So about 10 months after her murder, the police were contacted by a man that had said that he had picked up a hitchhiker, and said that whilst they was driving past the place where Julie Finley's body was found dead, he became highly agitated. So the man said that when he asked the hitchhiker why, the hitchhiker explained at the time of the murder that his motorbike had broken down and had stopped in a lay-by near the scene and saw this white van. Now, this is what a witness is saying. He's picked a hitchhiker up, and this hitchhiker is telling him now things. Now, this part of it can be upsetting to some people. Now, he said that he could hear bangs and screaming, and screams, not just screams, but screams coming from inside this van. He said that he went over to the van and he opened the rear door of this van and he saw a young naked woman who said to him, help me, for God's sake, help me. However, he said that the man then came over and told him that the woman was his girlfriend. And he told him to mind his own business and to go away, which the hitchhiker said that he did. Now, so this information was broadcast to the television programme Crime Watch UK on the 2nd of November 1995, which the police said that they thought the account was true. They're telling you that the man that picked up the hitchhiker, the police believe what he said to be true. And the information that they knew about was definitely this man was there, because he described, as this hitchhiker described, a lot about this crime. However, the hitchhiker never contacted the police himself, even after many, many appeals. So the police are then, and you would theorise, wouldn't you, whether the hitchhiker himself was just a hitchhiker and was scared of what he saw, because he didn't report it, did he, to the police or anything else, or whether the hitchhiker was the killer himself. Now, as with Becky's murder, let's go back to this first murder. Becky, he used his van, and his van had run out of petrol, and he hitchhiked then to get somewhere. Again, that's how he was caught. Again, more evidence towards Becky's murder, right near where this body was dumped. So Halliwell isn't the most sensible killer when it comes to making sure you've got enough petrol, this, that and the other, to get away from the scene. His mind is clearly taken up with how to kill. Also, Julie was said that she was going to meet a taxi driver, the same as Becky. Becky had a relationship with Halliwell. Julie and Becky actually, I would say, look quite similar. Blonde, but Halliwell, I don't think, had a preference, to tell you the truth. Anyway, the hitchhiker was described as being in his mid-20s, 5'8", clean cut, short blonde hair, crew cut. The police added that due to his accent, they thought the hitchhiker came from St Helens area. It was said that he was going to see his grandfather in Ainsdale area, and the police said that it's essential that this man came forward, and he never did. No one's ever heard from this person again. If you ask me, because he seemed to know a lot about this murder of Julie, he described the murder to really the person that had given him a lift. Killers like to talk, and I think he put himself in the third person, what he'd seen. I think the man that this man picked up was probably the killer, and it was probably Halliwell. Now, Halliwell was also linked to 3 other female victims, all of whom were alone and were probably enticed into his car in the city area before being dumped in a more remote location. Now, in the first video I said that he was very good. He was, he had an encyclopedic sort of brain when it comes to areas and waterways and stuff like that. He knew the land, this man. He really did. He knew his way around. So let's talk about now, I think, was it Carol Clark? She was 32. She was picked up from Bristol Red Light District in March 1993 before being dumped in a canal at Sharpness in Gloucestershire. It is believed that she either suffered a heavy blow to the neck or was strangled. Now, in her case, right, the police are not releasing how she died as such, because there's some evidence related around that. So they can't release that, because if they actually get someone for this murder, then that would be used and to sort of help them. So there's a reason why it's not clear on how Carol Clark was murdered. Police do hold back certain things if they need to for further investigation, or if a potential suspect comes up. So that's why it's unclear. Now, Halliwell lived about 40 miles away at the time and had good knowledge of all the canals. As I've said before, he was very, very good. And he was a narrowboat enthusiast as well. So the victim of the brother, Terry Townsend, said that the family had noticed similarities in a confession between the murders and the killer and the convictions of Jackie Wines, 35, and the mother, and she was the mother, and she was abducted actually from Bristol, again very close to Swindon, Wales, all this sort of area, and she was murdered in 1985. So we're going back a little bit now when we're looking at Halliwell's earlier crimes. Yvonne Fitt was also a mother, and she was found in a shallow grave outside Otley, West Yorkshire in 1992. Like Miss Wynne's, Miss Clark was snatched from the red light district. So now let's talk a little bit in depth about Carol Clark's murder. Now, Carol Clark, as I say, strangled, neck broke, a lot of different things. There's issues with that, so that's why I can't go into too much detail about actually that. But her, again, unsolved, over 25 years, 30, these are unsolved. All of these cases are unsolved at the moment. So it was Friday the 26th of March 1993 when Carol Clark was last seen on the streets in Bristol, and 2 days later, some 30 miles away, her partially closed body was discovered dumped on the bank of a canal. She had been sort of strangled, I suppose, and that was one of his things as well. But anyway, and but years later, this case is still affecting a lot of people because, listen, all of these 4 girls we're going to talk about were prostitutes, okay, but they all had lives. And if there's a serial killer out there, and if it wasn't Halliwell, then it's somebody else. We've had a lot of serial killers that target, prostitutes because it's easy, or they think to get away with it. They want to take someone's life and they think they're the ones that are the most easiest to do because they're not going to get caught. Who's going to look for them? Could be months before anyone notices they're gone. These people have families. They have families. They have lives. It's shocking, really. Listen, the police have questioned several serial killers, to tell you the truth, in this, because there is several serial killers out there to be questioned. And exactly what happened, killed Carol, is still really a mystery, really. She was literally picked up. So a brown leather jacket, a black polo neck sweater, denim skirt, blue skirt, a baseball cap worn on the night has still never been found. So the killer took the clothing. They took it from her. 32-year-old lived in a flat in Picton Street and worked as a prostitute when she disappeared. So Carol grown up with her mum and dad. I think it was Peter and Phyllis, actually. It was her mum and dad. And she had left home at the age of 17 and began working in a Bristol hotel. She turned then to heroin and crack, and at the age of really in her early 20s, she was then addicted to drugs, and then decided to she had to go and work on the streets really just to pay for her addiction. I think it's the same story, isn't it, we have with lots of these young victims now. When they start hitting the crack and the heroin, it's so addictive, they're going to do anything for that drug. And she put herself out on the streets, and they put themselves in a lot of danger. One, by being so intoxicated, I suppose, on these drugs. But you're getting into people's cars that you just don't know. Anyway, it was probably it was an ordinary night, they think, for Carol. She was doing her thing. She put on her outfit, and she took, she took out and went out into the streets just as normal as she normally would. It was a normal evening for her. I think the thing is what one of the other girls said about Carol is the car that she got into, she didn't actually question them. She didn't seem to negotiate, sort of thing. And I think this was the same with Becky as well, because she probably knew him. Now, Halliwell was well used to frequenting with prostitutes, actually drove a lot around, and he was infatuated with Becky. And I think a lot of these people knew him and would have trusted him, as Carol did. Now, her murder was highlighted, actually, I think, on BBC Crime Watch as well. The reconstruction was done later that summer. But really, there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. No breakthrough at all in anything. Listen, her dad, I think he was retired from Rolls-Royce. He was an engineer. Her boyfriend Peter, her boyfriend Christopher, I think it was. They tried everything to find out what happened to this girl. They never stopped looking to try and get evidence to help her to keep the case out there, to get to know everything. Now, detectives remain determined, even though that they were never able to trace Carol's movements really on that night. Once she really got into that car, that was it. She was gone. So I think, even though it was never, the police were never really able to say for sure Carol's movements on that night, as you can imagine. You know what she was doing. Also, a drug addiction. They're not out in your face or in your streets. They're doing what they've got to do. But they know that she was last seen on the Friday night. So investigators believe that she disappeared that night, and Carol was not murdered until either late on Saturday night or the early hours of Sunday morning. So she was taken somewhere. At the time, her father Peter, aged 67, said that it wasn't nice, was it? You know, with all these victims, you know, what I call secondary victims, the family members and everything, they are worried about these sort of perpetrators out in the street killing other people, because you can't find who did it to his daughter. You know these people are still out there. That they get really, really upset at that fault. And every, victim family member that I've ever spoke to has said the same thing. Yes, they grieve, for they want to know about what happened to their child, but on their mind is always about who's he going to do it to next. That's their real fear. These victims, these secondary victims, that's their real fear, and some find it very, very difficult to live with. One, not knowing what happened to their child, but also thinking that it's going to happen to somebody else. So the detectives, I think, as the years gone on and forensic testing and everything's got better, that they were sort of confident at first. I think she was battered to death, but then, things changed. New techniques changed and stuff, where they thought, no, that wasn't the case, and this is sort of why they're holding a little bit of it back. I think they narrowed down also her time of death. At the time of her death, there was key evidence, including forensic samples, taken. But again, as time's gone on, where we're getting better with our samples and the more deterioration and stuff that there is, we can actually take such minute samples from. So they're hoping that someday them samples will be able to use to create a profile, but at the point that's not it. They actually know that she was had something to eat also as well before she died. So there was, did anyone see her in a cafe, or did someone take her home and cook for her? They're saying in these cases someone knows something, but they're just not coming forward, again out of fear or stuff. But somebody knows something about the death of Carol. So listen, all these cases, there may not be investigations into them now, but there's periodical. If there is more evidence that comes up, if someone remembers something, sees something, new DNA techniques, more testing comes out, where the profile of a killer, these cases are then reopened and looked at. and it's continued. They're cold cases, and they're shelved for a while, but they're continually looked over. Because we have new techniques now, don't we? We have lots and lots of things going on with DNA. And really these cases are all about DNA. They're all about evidence, I suppose, aren't they? Trying to link Halliwell to certain cases, or trying to, eliminate him from these cases in a way. Because if it wasn't him, it was somebody else. And a DNA profile would prove who it was. Now, if it was Halliwell and there's DNA profiles here, we would either clear him or convict him. That's what it would be. But also, we've had other serial killers now with their with their DNA taken, and we could also eliminate them because there, as I said, there were several working in this area at this time. So again, there's another one now. We've got Linda Guest. Now, she had many aliases actually. I think she had 2 homes and she had many aliases, and her other alias was Jackie Wines. So that's why it's wrote like that. But Linda Guest, I think, was her name. And that's what's, I think most people know her as. Now, Linda, she was found on a bridle path near Frampton in Cotterell in 1985. So another earlier crime, if it is Halliwell. Now, she was 35-year-old. She was a prostitute, again from Bristol area. She was murdered in April 1985. Her husband had deserted her, and she had 3 children who had been taken into care, and she often went by this alias as, I think it was Jackie Wines, and she went by the alias of Linda Guest and others' names. So there's quite a lot here. So she was a bit of a loner. Actually, she had only one real friend, and that was Avril Myers, which she shared a house with. Don't forget, she's now lost everything. So the night that she was murdered, she had visited April in hospital and then went out on the streets to work. Now, it was terribly cold. It's Bristol. It was terribly cold, they said that night. But in the town centre it was quite busy, and it was the badminton horse trials again. Something was going on that weekend around there, so there was quite a lot of people around. The town was quite busy. So I think she was seen by a few people between 8 and 10 p.m, and at 10:45 she walked up to Bridgecock Road with one other girl, and there was this red Cortina that was parked on the corner of Hepburn Road, and that's where Jackie lived. The Cortina was parked right there. Now, she also got into this car without negotiating a cost or a price. No talking through the window. So she knew her killer. She knew. Now, this man was described as having curly, sort of blonde hair. And it was about 11:10 when Jackie was seen again in the area of Ashley Road in the middle of St Paul's. Now, someone saw her getting into a small escort type van at 11:20 p.m. Jackie was seen walking away from a van up Ashton Road. So she got out of that van. Now, that was the last time that she was seen alive. Now, it was about midnight time, and there was this carload of these youngsters, all smoking, probably having a bit of marijuana, whatever else they're doing, drinking, sitting there in their car in this lane. Now, they'd pulled off, it's like a country lane, there's a little track, and they'd pulled in there, just doing their own thing, minding their own business. And it was a small village, actually, this Frampton in Cotterell, and it was about 9 miles away from the centre of Bristol. This is where they were parked. Now, they sat listening to this music, chilling out, doing what they're doing. They had no idea what was going on around them. At 12:10 a.m, Mr. and Mrs. Shilton passed the end of the track where these boys were parked. They saw a white, large transit-type van parked yards away from the boys. Don't forget, these boys are oblivious to it. They're having a good time. The man was described as slim build, with blue jeans, a multicoloured bomber jacket, standing beside his van with what looked like a large white bundle at his feet. Now, the Shiltons thought that he was fly tipping. Now, listen, even in them days, we've got terrible issues with fly tipping. In them days, you know, you would think it as well, I would think. So really, you're not going to approach these people, so they probably thought, we're going to move on. The boys were oblivious, as I said, and this was now 12:15 a.m. Once the van had gone, they did then see this dark Cortina driving up and arriving there. So at 12:20 a.m. in the morning, this Craig Hallen and his girlfriend, Julie, passed the same entranceway. So now we've had the car sitting with all the boys. We've had Mr. and Mrs. Shilton drive by, see someone in a transit van have a bundle of something at his feet. Now the boys have gone. We've seen now this dark Cortina arrive. And now these other people have drove past. Now, when they've drove past, they've sort of thought, hang on a minute, that's not just a bundle of something. That looks like a body. So they've stopped. The Cortina did stop, but then it's turned round and drove off. Now this is the same Cortina that was seen look outside her house hours before. So now we have this body of Linda Guest laying on the floor. The bundle that was next to the man's feet from the van is now a body, and it's that of Linda Guest. The people have turned round, seen it. As they've turned round, the Cortina that was seen earlier on in the same street as where she was earlier has also turned round and gone. They must have seen the body on the road. Now, lots of people, right, if you see a body, are not going to stop. If you've got drugs in that car or you're doing something illegal, they're not going to stop. They don't want to be known by the police, they're off. Doesn't mean they had anything to do with it, but they never came forward either as witnesses. So was that Cortina and that white van something to do with these murderers? Is this, all these killings, not just the work of one man? I think this, with this case, you have to ask the question, was there more than one? So what's the motive here then? Because she still had her money on her, so it wasn't robbery. You know, she wasn't an argumentative person. She was actually a very soft, kind person. If they ruled out her arguing with a client over money or anything else as being a motive. So the real motive then was that someone had got in their car or their van that night and went out to kill prostitutes because they thought they could. And he did. And to this day, this case remains unsolved. The police still would like to talk to the people who was driving this Ford Escort type van on Ashley Road at 11:10. They would still like to talk to the curly-haired blonde man in the dark Cortina at 10:45 p.m. But no one has ever come forward as witnesses in this. I think the white van is probably the most important sighting here. This large white bundle the Shiltons, saw was likely to be Jackie's body that he was discarding, even though it was in front of, or the parked in front of him, the killer, was this car full of these lads, not oblivious, going to know what was going on. This killer is so blatant that he didn't care. He didn't care. There was witnesses around, really, and he just knew he would get away with murder, and up till now he did. So anyway, this white van, the important white van that was dumping this bundle of stuff, which was without a doubt her body. Listen, I think it had some damage to the bodywork on it and stuff. It is really unfortunate, isn't it, that this is now another person that her murder has been unsolved, because it looks like, with what we're looking at, and as I said, if it wasn't Halliwell, if it's somebody else, there is a serial killer out here. Now Halliwell would have killed anybody because he was an opportunist killer. They didn't all have to be prostitutes. And I think, if we've learned things from other cases, is that when you profile these sort of cases, that you don't put, if they're not prostitutes, he didn't do it. That's not right, because this is what happened with, and we spoke about it before, and I'm going to do his case quite, soon, the Wiltshire Ripper, because he got away with murder for quite a long while because people discarded evidence that other victims, because they weren't prostitutes, he didn't do. And he started killing actually quite young, and had attacked people quite often, actually, hit them over the head. He escalated. Peter Sutcliffe, he escalated. And it looks like with Halliwell, when he was in prison early in the 80s, when he was saying how many do you have to kill to be a serial killer, this man was already killing. He was already killing then. He was just not cool. And as I said, he was really cool, wasn't he? Because he made a mistake with the CCTV when he killed Sean. So it's really important that you don't put everyone in a box when you're investigating a crime. It doesn't matter what the victimology is. You have to look outside that box, because killers change their MO because they don't want to get caught. And a victim is a victim, one, because they may have a certain preference, but most of them are just opportunists. If they can, they will. Okay, let's talk about Evil Fit. Now, she was stabbed to death and her body was left in a beauty spot near Aughton. It was quite a shallow grave, and Halliwell was known for that sort of thing. And again, her killer has never been found. This is another unsolved. The final sighting, actually, of the single, this is from Leeds, this mum, Yvonne, was in Bradford on July the 16th, 1992. 8 months later, her decomposing body was found hidden in a shallow grave in Norwood Edge in Lindsay Wood, around 6 miles outside Aughton, by a man literally picking mushrooms. It was thought that she had been dead for some time, possibly several months. It was established that she had been stabbed to death and her body had been taken to this rural location. Again, old Halliwell loves a bit of rural location. Some of these bodies really are actually, most of his bodies are always just found by accident, especially the ones that he's dumped in very rural locations. It was established that she'd been stabbed to death and that her body had been taken to these rural locations from either Leeds or Bradford, but detectives didn't know if she was taken there alive or dead. So because by that stage it's very difficult to know. So was she kept somewhere, then murdered and then dumped, or did he take her there and just kill her? So Yvonne, who was 32, and she was the mother of an 11-year-old girl at the time of her death, and she was working as a sex worker in the red light district of both Bradford and Leeds. Reports at the time said that she was addicted to drugs. It was reported that she had worked as a prostitute in the Mannington area of Bradford and Chapeltown in Leeds since 1981. Detective believes that her killer stabbed her to death up to 2 months before her body was actually found, so she may have been kept for quite a long time. An inquiry into her death heard that she died from stab wounds to her chest and was probably killed in about the July time of 1992. Her murder again featured on BBC Crime Watch show in 1992. But again, despite public appeals and information, her killer was never found again, or not at all, never. There was a lot of renewed appeals for information that was issued by the cold case detectives, and who's asked for any anonymous callers to come forward. So in 1992, a caller gave the name of a suspect when she called in to the Crime Watch show. The 32-year-old woman was questioned about the death in December 1992, but she was released without being charged. Now, at the time, in 2019, the reappeal detectives, Chief Inspector Emma Winfield, said that Yvonne was a daughter, a sister, a mother, and she had a life. And I keep saying this when we go through these cases of prostitutes, that people don't seem interested. But the problem is, a killer will kill. And yeah, the only reason they're choosing prostitutes is not because what they do for a living. It's because they're easy targets because of what they do for a living. That they believe, and sometimes how society portray themselves to prostitutes and things and people, that, if we don't believe in what they do, it's like we don't care. The thing is, if we don't start caring about people who go missing and who are murdered just because of what they do for a living, these killers will continue to kill, and then they will change their MO from killing prostitutes to killing people who we assume, don't we, as law-abiding citizens, these are innocent victims. All victims are innocent. And if we allow serial killers to get off, if we don't care about the victims enough to talk about it, to help try and solve these crimes, there's a killer out there, a killer of women, really. And in the end, it won't just be prostitutes they kill. And I think you can tell that with Halliwell. In the end, they are so focused on the kill. It's an opportunist kill. You're on your own. I'll take you. They lose that insight, that listen, if he hadn't killed Sean, he would never have been caught. Sean wasn't a prostitute. Becky had been dead years, buried 12, 13 years before they found her body. It was the mistakes he made on camera, this, that and the other, in these areas that caught Halliwell, or else he'd be still out there. So we must care about every victim. Every crime should be treated the same way. The investigations, the public opinion needs to change. It's not about the victim after they're dead. It's about the criminal. It's about the perpetrator, to remove that perpetrator from our society, or else they're only going to get worse. So anyway, these have been these 4 crimes, and with Yvonne's mum, and I have to feel for Yvonne's mother. Now, she spoke emotionally actually with that Crime Watch interview about her daughter's crime, because her mother didn't care what she did for a living. This man took her daughter's life. She left her own daughter without a mother. And again, as I say it all the time with these secondary victims, their worry is, who's next? Who is this person going to kill next? Because they know how it feels to have that loss, to feel that grief, the anger, the frustration of not knowing. But every one of these victims, families, are more concerned about people in society having to be so careful about killers like this out there. And as her mother said, she may never find out who killed her daughter, but she just hopes they do, for the sake of society, really. So again, Yvonne was brutally killed, and she was left without her dignity. This is what her mother's saying. Despite the passage of time, remains committed to getting justice for her family. These police are still on this. They just have been waiting and waiting for new technology to come out, new ways of investigating crime, new ways of forensic detection, which is coming. So if it wasn't Halliwell and if it was somebody else, you know, many serial killers have got away with it for many, many years. And they're sitting there now very worried about that knock on the door. And sooner or later, it will come. Because the technology that we've got now to solve these crimes, to go back in not only the victim's history, but in the perpetrator's history, to find them, to link them through DNA. It's phenomenal, really, isn't it? So if you're a serial killer out there, you should be worried, because sooner or later, you will be caught. They all are. And I hope in this case, it either proves that Halliwell did these crimes, or he didn't. And if he didn't, they need to prove who did. Because this is only 4 of many, I can't tell you how many, to tell you the truth. I can't tell you how many. Every one of these people have died a terrible death by the hands of a serial killer. Every one of them. I could be here all day, case after case after case after case. Same thing. Same thing. Yes, these girls have made themselves easy victims because of their addiction to drugs, which then takes them into the lifestyle of prostitution. And that has gone on for years. Years. And it's no better today than it was in the 70s, the 80s, you know, the 60s. It's no different. You need to be careful. You need to think about your safety if you're doing this sort of work. Because serial killers, I've said this before, are out there now. Some have never, ever been caught. And some never will be, because if they haven't been arrested at any point and their DNA isn't on a database that 20, 25 years ago, if they've done no crime since then or been caught for it, then their DNA at this point will not save you and get them arrested. But if their family, their brother, their cousin, their second cousin, their third aunt, their fourth uncle has done a crime in the last 20 years, sooner or later it will. So listen, this has been a 4-in-1. Did Halliwell have anything to do with these murders? Probably. The probability is more than 50-50. Is there other serial killers out there? Of course there is. And could they have done it? Of course they could. Of course they could. I want to know your opinion on it. Who do you think done it? So many serial killers around in this area at this time. You know, let me know who you think done it. Do you think the evidence is there enough for Halliwell? Because you know Halliwell's never going to tell you anything, because he won't. Remember, he wanted to make a deal with the police, didn't he? You know, I'll say yes to Becca's murder, but don't come and ever ask me anything again. And, you know, don't speak to me again. Well, the police couldn't agree with it, and this is why the police couldn't agree with it. Because the evidence is building against Halliwell to be probably one of the most prolific serial killers this country's ever seen. Because I think there's much more to this man than these 4 murders. Much more. I think this man has killed and killed and killed and killed and killed. I don't think he ever stopped. And it would be really interesting to find out what one was his first. How young was he? Because his upbringing, you know, from the mother, you know, she weren't right. You have a child that wasn't right growing up. You know, when you have a mother that's putting an iron on your hand and burning your hand and smiling at you as she's doing it, what have you done to this child? You've created a monster. And that's Halliwell. He's a monster. There is no empathy, there is no feeling. This is a pure psychopathic serial killer. That's exactly what he is. So, this has been a mixture, hasn't it, of stuff. So I hope you found it interesting. I hope you don't mind that I put all 4 together in this case. And I think the next lot of cases coming up are like the Bowman children and stuff like that, and they're Australian cases, and again they are linked, right? There's 3 cases there. I think in total there's 6 children that have disappeared and never been found, you know, or have been found. I think 2 of them are found, you know, listen, disappeared without a trace. And again, the same sort of suspects are all through it in these cases. So they're earlier crimes, they're unsolved crimes, and then that will probably be the last in the series of that. I think I've got a couple of American cases to do on it, and then that will be the last on the unsolved ones for now. As I say to you, I love unsolved, but I love unsolved where there is possibilities, where there is theories that it could be something else. And, you know, if we all had the money, wouldn't it be lovely to get the genealogist in and go through the DNA and all this? You're talking a load of money. So for now, we can only speculate, if you'd like to call it, on these cases, on who did it. And hopefully the police at some point, and the investigators and the forensic teams and everything now that are coming up, can solve these crimes and answer them questions for us. So, you know what to do. Thumbs up if you've liked it. Hit that thumbs up button. You can subscribe. You can hit that bell for notifications on the next videos that are coming out. You can follow us on Spotify. Also, this will be on there on the podcast. You can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. So, thank you, my partners in crime. Until the next time. Bye-bye.